Hello and welcome back to another episode of Tash Teaches. I'm Tash, and in today's video we're going to be looking at this rather gargantuous monstrosity of a synthesizer patch. Some of you guys may or may not know the Eurorack sequencer, the René from Make Noise. Now this is probably my all-time favourite piece of music gear, even though it is just a sequencer. And I had one of these a number of years ago. I sold it, I bought number two, I then sold it. And it became actually quite difficult to find the specific version 1. So I was like, okay, well, how do I sit down and try and figure out how to create something that does as close as I could to that in the grid? You may also remember that I posted a video that was this. Let's take a quick listen.
I'm so excited to have finally made a grid version of the Make Noise René XY sequencer. It's so cool being able to jump around with like Euclidean rhythms in this grid shape. It's just the endless melodies.
It really is. So what's cool about this was that this early version only had a sort of a couple of spaces to it. I then went on to add a lot more functionality to this, and I would love to show you a little bit about how this plays, what it feels like, and what we can do with it. So just by default, you can see that we have movement. Bloody lovely. This is actually two versions playing at the same time. So this one is doing another random movement, should we say. But for now, I'm actually just going to initialize this, and I'm going to show you what we can do with it. So first and foremost, let's just take an instance of Make Noise René. I'm going to hide this, and I'm going to add a new MIDI channel, and we're going to say René. Here we go, Make Noise René XY sequencer. And I'm just going to put a polymer after it, and we'll just do a little sine wave. I'm going to do sine wave as is. Now I'm going to make it so that nothing happens at first, and then we'll dive in to see what we can do with it. But first I want to go in here and just give you a little talk around of what these sections are. So the way that this device was set up was that you have values here with these knobs, and of course this could be pitch, but this could be, it's a CV, right? So you could use this to control anything, whether it was filter. But then you also have gates, and I think that the way that they referred to this device was that it was a Cartesian sequencer, i.e. like X and Y points. And so we could enable or disable whether or not these spaces on the XY grid would send a gate or send a trigger signal. So for example, we could turn off in this sense, every single one of them except for this is on. So if we were stepping through this in some way, we would have da 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 da. And the reason why the pitch wasn't then changing in my fantastically realistic version of that was because all of these knobs are set to nothing. Or I say nothing, they were set to the same value. But what's kind of cool is the way that we move around this is actually based off of gate input. So if we have a signal coming into the X forward space, it will then advance forward. If we don't have anything coming into the Y, then we will just stay here and, you know, going forwards and backwards, blah, blah, blah. But if we start to increase a Y value into there at 4 times slower, it would go da, 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 da. But if we did say 2 times that, it would go da, 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 da. And so you can start to imagine how having like a 3 come in can create some really interesting spaces. And of course, what's nice about this is the input that you use going into it will then ultimately change how it progresses, but you can keep the positions of the pitch or whatever it is the same. So if we go back here, the way that I could set this up in Bitwig was that these up here, this is actually the player. So we don't actually touch these, but if we want to turn on or off individual gates, we do so here. So if I wanted to have just these notes trigger, and I'll get more deep into what I mean by that in a second, but we would turn them on and off up here. So you can see even actually turning it on, we're hearing a little something because of the fact that we're in this position here. Now, the position of these, every time a new square lights up, it sends a gate signal. Now there was a lot of shit that had to go into making this thing, and frankly it was so long ago I don't necessarily even know how I built this anymore. So it's kind of funny to look at this and go, well, there's definitely a lot of cables, but I can remember specifically how to use this thing. So if I were to, I'm just going to double click all of this. This is the pitch. So we don't have this as a knob. It was a knob, but I thought that it was actually more meaningful to be able to see the pitch rather than having to estimate it. So like here, I could set this to any kind of value, but in this case, I'm just going to put these all back to C. And let's just, I suppose I should initialize this patch before I upload it for you guys. But, oh fuck, I already gave my secret away then. But we have now these pitches. If I were to press play, nothing is happening because of the fact that there is no movement. I would need to move the positioning here. So you see that as I start to move this, when we get to 25%, we've now moved to the next square. We go on, and we go on. And so if I move these back and forth, I can effectively trigger these notes by the positioning of a knob. You'll also note that some of these are actually a lot louder than each other. Forget that for a second. So positioning, da, 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 da. Now, how could we do this? Well, one way would be to enable what I've called the drive X, which would just automatically, if you press play, move and step through at a ratio here. So currently we have a 1 bar before it moves. If I set this to 2, we now have a half note. If we set this to 4, we have a quarter note. If I set this to 8, we have an 8th note, and obviously if I put it to 16, now we have a 16th note. If I put it to anything other than that, say an 11, we then have a Euclidean sequence, or a Euclidean rhythm. So if I put a metronome on, let's put this to a faster tempo. I'm actually going to go to say like 120, and let's do say 3. So we can pick any of these values that aren't on the grid. So if I put it back to 4, obviously we have a, in fact there we have actually a 16th note. I think this is because of the fact that depending on, there we go. So if I put this to a bar, the device phase, now it will work appropriately. So these are now quarter notes. If I put it to 1, now it's a bar, or yeah, it seems to be. And then if we were to do say 11, this is going to be 11 fit into 16, 11 into 16 Euclidean rhythm. But this isn't super interesting because all of the pitches are the same. So why don't we go up here, and I'm going to say we'll do a C, then we'll go to a G, then we're going to come down to a B, and then I'm going to go down here to an E. So this is a C major 7, just laid out in a slightly interesting way. So let's just press play. Now it's already starting to be far more interesting. Now what might be kind of cool is to be able to have a few chords. So we've got here a C, a G, and an E and a B. I want to do an A minor 7 in the same way. So I'm actually going to move this and I'm going to follow the same pattern. So this was a 5th, so I'm going to go A, E here. This was the 7th, so that would actually be a G, and then this was the 3rd, so that is, I believe, a C. So check this out. I'm now able to move the positioning down, and in fact, if I turn these guys off, so now we just only have 2 scrolls, I'm going to put on that every 1 bar, we actually drive onto the Y. So try this out. And I guess actually those gates don't turn on, so what we would need to do is to do something with a modulation. I'll show you that in a sec. So instead I can just manually do it here. So the positioning there is kind of cool. One other thing that you might know is that if I don't move it perfectly on the grid because I'm a human being, super cool. I'm also now realizing that one thing that when I made this that did not exist was note grid out. Actually, that's a lie. I've since updated that. Forget it. Because I was going to say we could use this on any other synth. Obviously, I've just put a standard sine wave in. But where this starts to get interesting is putting in, say, different chords. So let's also do a D minor here. So we'll do a D and an A, and then that's a C, and then we need the A, no, we need an F here. So now we have the next chord. Let's bring that in as well. So now we have a C major 7, A minor 7, then we have a D minor 7. So let's bring that in. Now we'll go to the D minor. And in fact, I was going to wait to explain this later, but this blue section here is velocity. So if you wanted to have, say, just the first hit, let's go back up here. If you wanted to just have this first hit be louder, we can bring that up. So now we have... Bring this up a little bit. Very nice. Why don't we explore the randomness here? Because I think that's where it's going to start to be a bit more interesting, is if we open this guy up here, I can obviously put XY drive on. So in fact, let's do a little bit of that drive. And now this here, if I bring the steps up, so we have an 11 over a 5, this is now going to allow us to have an interesting pattern that is skipping through all over the place. So let's give that a go. I need to actually turn on these other voices. Let's play a little bit more with some of these velocities. So you can obviously change the pitches here, which is very nice. You've also got this little setup, which is the CC. So by default, I have it set up to CC1. So let's go here and add the MIDI value. And by default, we're not going to see anything until we increase the CC scale, at which point you can now see that these squares also have their own CC value. So we could use this on, say, skew. And as we increase the scale, really lovely. We've also got bias here, so I could bring the overall bias of that down. I'm just going to push it into the other direction, push it further. We've also got velocity bias, so we can make them even harder, make them softer. Really lovely. But another option is, instead of having this play on the grid with the drive, is we could just turn those drives off. So I'm going to call this rhythmic. I'm going to duplicate this down, and this one is going to be freeform. What I'm going to do with this is make this a little bit more pad-like, should we say. And I'm going to open this up, just make sure that still same key is off. And what I'm going to do is turn off X and Y. And for now, let's just mute rhythmic. Because what I want to show you is that using, I'm going to turn off the metronome as well. If we put, let's put something really delicious here. I'm going to put the Valhalla Supermassive, just give a good bit of vibe. So if I were to just now move this knob, kind of like I was doing up here, I've actually set up all of these menus. So you can go in here and you could actually play with the scale. It's probably easier to just open it up, but I wanted to give people the option to do everything inside here. It'd be nice if we could actually have grids for it, but I'm going to go back to here. If I just move this knob, now we hear nothing. And the reason why is because we have no attack on this thing. There we go, we need a little less attack. If we were to take something to move this for us, say a random, I'm going to make this a very smooth moving random, and I'm going to use that to move the X position. So if we were to just press play now, you can see that this knob, as it moves, if I speed this up a bit, it's only going to trigger a note when it goes past 25, 50, or 75. So let's increase this. Cool. Why don't we now duplicate this, and I'm going to have on another layer something that does the same thing with the Y. So now that we have a very easy way of structuring different notes, I'm also going to use CC1 for something else. Why don't we use that for... Oh, really lovely. Why don't we use CC1 to do panning as well? So I'm going to pan it a bit to the left, and then I'll pan this to the right. Maybe we can also use CC1 on attack a bit. I'm going to do a little bit of glide as well. Fuck it, why not? Really lovely. Now the speed, of course, at which we use this will change how the notes are playing. So if we take another random here, and I'm going to use this smooth moving random, well, it's not smooth, that's just very fast. I'm going to use this to play with the speed of these guys. We'll make another one. Very nice. I might even actually increase the overall octave of this. Oh, really delicious. I put a bit of noise in there. Oh, we've got RC20 on the master bus. Tremendous, just so beautiful. Let's now bring in the rhythmic element as well. Maybe we can bring the volume of this up a bit. Maybe even increase. I want to bring the output of this down so I can just fade it in. I'm going to decrease the speed of this. So currently we have it set to a bar. I'm going to set this to 2 bar phase. So I can increase the steps. Oh, lovely. Now, of course, we have a bunch of randomness happening here, and then as well, this one isn't necessarily random, but we are getting... Oh, that's just so beautiful. What the fuck? We can't stop this with pause because these guys are just continuously moving. Oh, so good. I could listen to that forever. But I'm going to do this. One of the nice things as well is that let's turn off drive here again, and instead I'm going to take an LFO and I'm going to use this LFO synced to the grid. So if I put this as like a triangle wave, for example, this is going to sync with the grid. So why don't we take a kick drum? I'm at 120. What does this sound like? We're going to take this one, whatever. I'm not too stoked with it, but we'll just put a filter on. We'll take an envelope of some sort. We're going to use that envelope to open up the filter cutoff a little bit, and let's just put a 4/4 kick. Nice. I know that we've got a big old reverb somewhere. So let's see what happens. Okay, nice. So what I'm going to do now is put on this LFO to the positioning of X. And you're going to see that this is going to play in time with the kick. So of course we can have these things play. One of the reasons why it's staying half is because this is a bipolar signal. If I turn this onto unipolar, now we have a synced grid. We could take another LFO here, and let's maybe set this one. I suppose this actually needs to be, I'm going to set this to bar, set it to quarter note, half note. Okay, nice. So I'm actually going to duplicate this, and let's do one which is set to bar. And this bar is going to move the Y value. If I were to now change that this isn't a linear pattern, to add a bit of smoothness in here, you're going to see what's going to happen is we're going to deviate away from having this repeatable, like, sharp pattern. Which is really lovely. If we take another LFO now, we could use this LFO to change the speed. Let's go for, say, like, quarter notes again. I'm going to use this here LFO to change maybe the speed of this one. Or we could even use it to change the shaping on here. So currently we have it as a sharp line. If I were to now have, this is excessively now going to be changing the shape of the other LFO. So we can get some really interesting rhythms coming through. Maybe we could also make it so that instead of just being a straight line, which is of course making the pattern go from left to right, if we go the other way, now it's going to go backwards. If we put it in the middle, it's going to be double the speed in terms of pitch because it's going to be fitting the same thing in. So if we were to take something like a step sequencer now, we can use this set to say 16th notes. I'm going to clear this for now. Let's use this all the way to the left, and I'm going to map all the way to the right, and I have the ability now to quickly change the shape of If I take another one here, I think this Y value is what's going to be causing that subtle change there. So why don't we go in here and we'll map the same thing. And you just can't write these melodies on your own. You know, there's something so magical about that. And again, I haven't mentioned, but you can go in here, rhythmic. Oh, there we go. Rhythmic. We'll take XY sequencer. You can record the MIDI out, which is really cool. Super cool. Let's take one more of these guys here, and I'm going to use this to maybe do the positioning on this one. And what's nice is we don't always have to have a gate signal come through. So what I could do, let's make this a little bit longer. If we bring the chance down, we may not advance on the X or on the Y. Ah, that's a lie. That is a total lie, because that only works when drive is on. So actually, why don't we turn off this guy? So now we're not advancing on the Y. Oh, that's actually really cool. And I can now move it manually. Really nice, but what we could now do is have, say, some amount of chance that it progresses. So it's not always going to progress. Don't necessarily like the chords we've got going here. D, F, A, C. Why don't we do D, A, D, F, A. We'll do an E here. So we have A, C, E, G. A, C, E, G. Let's do actually a B, because that's then going to be the 9th. And then finally down here we have a bunch of C's again. Let's do F, C. Then we'll do an A. Oh, where is A? There we go. And then maybe we'll do a G. Increase the steps. So now again it's going to move at a slightly different rate. Let's bring back in our pad. And it's really up to you how you choose to use this. I don't necessarily like whatever chord that was on. Because of course you don't necessarily even need to, if I turn off the dry here, you don't necessarily need to go all the way. We could just bounce back and forth between the first two chords if we only modulate like 25 to 50%. Let's change the speed of this, make this say 1.5 bars. One other thing to note is that we could go in here and say, well actually we'd like to change the scale. So I'm going to make this into one of my faves, which is this little guy. Of course we need to change it in the other mode too. And I think actually we have an issue here because we've got these key filters. But yeah, I mean, it really is so fun. And, you know, I wish that I still had this piece of gear. It was a really satisfying way of making music, but at the same time, I'm just blessed that we have things like the grid that just make this kind of workflow so easy. I say easy, I think I spent hours and hours and hours making this thing because each step of the way ran into obviously a bunch of issues. But I really do love Bitwig again. I know a lot of you have been like, why are you making Ableton stuff? Why are you fucking doing shit in Ableton? I think I'm excited to get back into Bitwig. And this actually leads me to a very exciting announcement, which is that today, Wednesday, November 27th, you are now able to purchase my Bitwig Grid 101 course, which has 9 hours of content. You can see here we start from what is the grid into navigating in the grid. You can see how in-depth this fucking course is. It took me ages to make all of my favorite utility devices and how to use them, rhythmic devices. We talk about pitch devices. We talk about randomness. So we go all the way from the absolute beginner knowledge, even talking about various ideas that make up modular synthesis and how to think about it. But then we even go down here to advanced patch ideas where we build some truly remarkable things. And I think you're going to absolutely love this. And the reason why I even mention this is because it is a Black Friday deal. Let's see if we can find the link here. I'm going to put it down in the description. But if you purchase it now before Monday, the Cyber Monday, so they call it, you can get it for 50% off for $49.50. And not just that, but I am also throwing in René. So you will be able to download this, play with this yourself, use it in your own productions for completely free. I'm so glad to have found this again. I thought that I'd completely lost it. But thank you so much for tuning in. That's all we have time for today, folks, because my lady is back with burgers. She's been gone for a very long time. I'm glad that she has brought me nourishment, but I'm also glad that she is alive and well. So that is all we have time for today, folks. But I do hope that this video has been inspiring and perhaps a little informative about some of the cool things that you can do with Bitwig. If you are keen to get in the ground level of understanding and become a Bitwig grid master, I urge you to check out the Bitwig Grid 101 course. Even people who have a decent basic understanding, I kind of should have named it Ableton 101 through 301 because it really does go from that early stage all through to being able to create, perhaps we don't build this in it, but some really, really fantastic in-depth patches. So happy Wednesday, happy almost Thanksgiving to all of you Armoricans out there. I'm sending all my love and we shall see you soon.